There was a time when games arrived finished, printed on discs, sealed in plastic, declared complete. You paid once. You played what you were given. But somehow between box copies and digital storefronts, something shifted. Games stopped being finished products. They became public process. So, what changed? And when did development stop happening behind closed doors and started happening in front of us? This is the birth of early access. Before the 2010s, the industry operated on a simple rule. Development was private, release was final. Studios built games in isolation. Publishers funded them, retailers distributed them, players consumed them. The phrase going gold meant something concrete. It meant the disc was finalized, the build was locked, there were no second chances. Patches existed, but they were rare and often inaccessible for console players. If a game shipped broken, that was the version history would remember. There was something stable about that model. Risk lived inside the studio walls. Uncertainty was absorbed by publishers. Players arrived at the end of the process, not the beginning. Development was invisible, mythical even. But that invisibility came at a cost. What happened when publishers refused risk? When innovation couldn't secure funding? When small developers couldn't even enter the system? Who carried the risk then? The answer slowly became the players, and that shift began quietly. In 2009, a small independent developer named Marcus Pearson released an unfinished game to the public. The game was called Minecraft. It was incomplete, unpolished, missing features, but it was playable, and more importantly, it was purchasable. Players didn't buy a finished experience. They bought access to its development. Each update was public, each change visible, each mechanic shaped by community feedback. This was new, not because games updated, that had happened before, but because funding was happening mid-creation. Players weren't just consumers, they were early investors. They were funding uncertainty. It worked. Minecraft's alpha phase didn't just test mechanics, it tested a new economic model. What if you didn't need a publisher at all? What if the audience could replace them? Minecraft didn't just popularize sandbox creativity, it normalized unfinished games as purchasable products. And that was the beginning of public development. In 2009, another platform emerged, Kickstarter. It wasn't built for games specifically, but it quickly became a tool for developers locked out of traditional funding pipelines. Studios could pitch directly to players. Concept art, vertical slices, promises. If enough people believed in the idea, the project would exist. No publisher required. For players this felt empowering. You weren't waiting for corporations to approve creativity. You were approving it yourself. You could revive dormant genres. Resurrect forgotten franchises. Fund passion projects. It felt democratic. But democracy has weight. When players fund development, who absorbs failure? If a publisher invests and the game collapses, the corporation takes the loss. If players invest and the game collapses, who does? The answer was subtle but profound. Risk had shifted from institution to individual. In 2013, Steam introduced an official category, Early Access. It wasn't crowdfunding, it wasn't pre-ordering. It was a marketplace for unfinished games. You could browse them, buy them, review them, and developers could build in public. Steam didn't create the idea, but it institutionalized it. This was no longer experimental, it was normalized. An unfinished game was no longer a risk signal. It was a business model. Players accepted missing features, placeholder art, roadmaps instead of conclusions. The process became the product, but this changes incentives. If revenue arrives before completion, what ensures completion ever arrives? For some projects, early access became a lifeline. For others, it became a loophole. The infrastructure had shifted, and system shapes behavior. Traditionally, publishers financed development in exchange for control and profit share. They absorbed upfront risk. Developers delivered milestones. The product launched when finished. Early access inverted that structure. Revenue could begin during development. Cash flow improved. Independence increased. Gatekeepers weakened. But the burden of uncertainty moved outward. For players, buying early access meant something new. You weren't just buying content. You were buying possibility. You were funding hope. And hope is intangible. Hope can sustain a community, but can also fracture one. What happens when expectations exceed capacity? When roadmaps stall? When updates slow? When communication breaks down? Public development requires public trust, and trust is a fragile currency. Early access didn't just change funding, it changed power dynamics. Communities became stakeholders. Feedback loops accelerated. Balance changes responded to player input. Feature requests shaped roadmaps. In some cases, games evolved collaboratively. In others, design direction fractured under competing demands. For developers, this was liberating and exhausting. You weren't building in silence anymore. You were building in front of thousands. Every delay visible. Every decision debated. Is that sustainable? Can creativity survive constant observation? Or does visibility reshape it? Public development turns audiences into participants. But participation changes authorship. The line between creator and consumer blurred, and the industry adjusted. Over time, the philosophy of early access expanded beyond indie development. Live service games adopted perpetual iteration. Roadmaps became marketing tools. Season content replaced finality. Even fully priced AAA titles launched with the expectation of ongoing updates. The concept of finished became fluid. Completion is no longer a fixed moment. It's a moving horizon. Games evolve months, sometimes years after launch. Sometimes for better, sometimes not. But the shift is undeniable. When development becomes continuous, does release still mean the same thing? Or has it become a milestone in a longer economic cycle? The birth of early access redefined the timeline of creation. Games no longer end at launch, they begin there. Once, development happened behind closed doors. Now, it happens in public. The walls came down gradually, from Minecraft's alpha builds, through crowdfunding campaigns, through Steam's early access framework. We gained transparency, we gained participation, we gained independence from traditional gatekeepers, but we also accepted uncertainty. Finished products became living systems. Ownership became ongoing engagement. And if risk moved quietly from corporations to communities. At the beginning we asked when development left the studio and entered the public square. The answer isn't a single date, it's a series of decisions, each one trading certainty for possibility. And today, when you buy an unfinished game, you're not just purchasing content, you're funding the future of something that doesn't fully exist yet. Public development is no longer experimental, it is infrastructure. New case files release every Monday, Wednesday and Friday.